Well, welcome to part 13, folks. Lucky number 13. Let's see if something goes wrong, which I hope not. We had a couple of questions. I want to start this video out by answering a couple of questions. Kind of neat stuff, I thought. I like to answer questions from folks. I mean, that's what it's all about. You know, I'm not going to get into any in-depth type of stuff, just general questions, because the purpose of this video series is to show people how to follow wires on a schematic. Now, these wires could be real close together. It doesn't matter, you know. You stay on one wire until it goes from point A to point B. The proximity, how close they are together, can make you blurry-eyed, but it's all the same, okay? Stephen Moore and our good buddy Phil over in the country of England, old Steel City 321 PB, they both mentioned that they had not known that the letter M on the old schematics was the Roman numeral. They used the letter M because it was the Roman numeral for 1,000. And then later on, of course, they changed it to K. And, you know, which brings up the question, well, if this is 1,000 for M, how did they denote meg on those same schematics? You know, 25 megohms, 10 megohms, 1 megohm, 2 megohms, 1.5 megohms, whatever. How did they denote megohm? How did they denote the M from the meg? Well, it's very simple. You look on the old schematics, many times you'll see it written just like that. Okay? They had M for 1,000 and meg for 1,000,000. It'll be just like you see it. The next question was, again, from Stephen Moore, our good subscriber Stephen Moore. He wanted to know, am I going to put the resistor back into the way he understood it, I was going to, you know, just put a straight wire there. Why not put the resistor back into the coil where we found it? Very good question, and I have a very good answer for it, at least from my point of view. You can only handle these coils so many times, and they're going to break. You know, here I have a chance to remove that resistor that apparently doesn't do anything. I don't even know why it's located there. I don't know. It was out of convenience, probably. So I'm going to relocate that resistor somewhere else in this schematic in the bottom of that chassis. Well, it's going to be in the same place in the schematic. It's just going to be in the bottom of the chassis somewhere, where the next repairman 20 years from now or 30 years from now can get to it without having, once again, to manhandle the coil like I'm having to do it now, because this thing is already 85 years old. What's 30 years from now, okay? Might be 115 years old. You know, we make it easy on the next repairman. That's two of the things I try to do. Anytime I work on the radio, I always think of the next guy down the line. It's very important to do that, okay? The next guy like me, the next guy like you. The next thing I want to cover is, you know, as I go through this stuff, especially, you know, again, it's for our new people, the newbies, the beginners, not the old guys that have been doing this for 3,000 years. You all know exactly what's going on. I keep emphasizing that the videos I do are for the young folks just coming into the hobby, or someone that just really never learned how to do it, okay? There's going to be mistakes made when you do these sorts of things. And, you know, you're going to hook up a wire to the wrong place. You're going to disconnect the wire and forget to hook it back up. And you're going to, you know, lose track of a wire altogether and never even realize it belongs in there. And then later on, you know, it's going to be like, gosh, this thing will not run. What did I do wrong? You know, and a lot of people sweat. They sweat. They hook up a wire wrong, make a mistake. Well, guess what? So what if you make a mistake? No big deal. It's not, you know, the earth will continue to rotate, okay? This is your radio. If it takes you a day, a month, a year, a decade to get your radio playing again, then so be it. There's no rush on this stuff. You make a mistake, you find a mistake, you fix the mistake, and if it takes you a long time to do it, so what? That's the attitude I want you to adopt. Now, the old boys that do this for a living, you know, or do it for extra money, you got a problem. You can't afford to be making mistakes because it costs you money. And your customer, you know, they're not going to sit around waiting for you to decide to figure out what your problem is with their radio or their television, whatever it, you know, might be. So those of you who are in it for the hobby, treat it like a hobby and make a boo-boo, so what? Keep saying that to yourself. So what? I'll find it. I'll fix it. Sometimes in the process of finding it and fixing it, you make another mistake. Trust me, I know what I'm talking about here. Don't worry about it, okay? Relax. This is supposed to be fun. The more times you get to go into a chassis and follow the wiring and repair it and fix it, and the more fun it is, okay? And you know, I know guys that, believe it or not, I know people who have bought radios, worked on them, had a grand old time working on the radios, and never got the radio playing, never. And they wind up selling it to some guy like me who can sit down and, you know, trace things out a little better, and it turns out to be some little mistake they made, okay? But they had a grand old time doing it, you know? That's the attitude I want you to have. I want you to have fun doing this stuff. This is not life or death, you understand? Good. Now back to the chassis. And by the way, when I said it's not life or death, yeah, it's not life or death as long as the chassis is all unhooked and there's no electricity going through it. But once the electricity goes through it, then it becomes life or death, okay? Be careful. All right, I'm sick and tired of looking at these capacitors. We have 3 electrolytics here and a coupling capacitor here, and I don't even know what that is. The end of it's all out of there. And what happened was the guy that had it before, he did a homemade solder job to the side of that can. Check that out, huh? Kind of messy there. He needed a ground, and that's where he picked it up. Yeah, like I said, the old boy that had this radio before, he knew what he was doing. You know, of course, he's got wires running everywhere down here. This is a big mess. This is going to be a big problem when we finally get to it. And I'm not so sure this isn't going to be a big problem, you know, because we're almost shortly, well, very quickly, maybe after the next video, we're going to be moving out of this entire section. Meaning, we're going to be moving out of this entire section, which is the same place, okay? And then we're going to have to go over in here, which shouldn't be too bad. But when we get down into here, oh, what a mess that's going to be. But anyway, right now I'm going to remove these 3 electrolytics and a couple other caps. We need the room, people. Besides, I'm sick of looking at them. I'm just fed up with it. Now, before I get around to, you know, actually unsoldering these things, I want you to look at, let me get a pencil here. I want you to look at this solder joint right here. This thing was soldered in and changed out by someone at some point in the past. Now, I'm going to zoom in here and get a little clarity for you. It's going to be a little shaky, I guess. Look at the way that thing was soldered in. How about that for a solder job, huh? You know, you get some of these old radios from time to time, and that's what you're going to run into. They thought they had it soldered, but it was not soldered. That's fun stuff. I like finding stuff like that. Alright, so what's the best way to unsolder these things? I never thought you'd ask. Watch this. Boom! That baby's out of there. Oh, I love it. Chop, chop. Now I will remove this wire first, the one that was not soldered very well, and then I will go snip on this one, and this one here goes down in here. We're going to go snip on that one, then we're going to unsolder the stubs, okay? Same thing. Look at this one. I don't even like the looks at that thing. Look at that. Boom. We'll just get that out of our way right now. I'll remove this wire later. This one here, same thing, okay? It'll be nice and cleaned up when you see it next. Well, there it is. All the junk out of that chassis. I want it out, all the those capacitors. Now look at it. It doesn't quite look so messy as it did, does it? Now don't get me wrong, it is still very messy because the fella that had this thing and kept it going, he ran wires everywhere, which way. It's going to take me a while to figure out what he did and probably unsolder a bunch of them and replace them with good new white wires. And by the way, a couple of folks have asked me what, I went over this once, I'm going to go over it again. The gauge of the wire we're going to use is 22 gauge. It's rated at 630 volts, and I get it from Radio Days. Now you can get both the solid wire or the stranded wire. I'll be using mostly on the bottom down here solid wire. Any wire that does not that is not pulled on, it is not flexible. We can, I mean, you know, it doesn't need to be flexed. Then we can go ahead and use solid hookup wire. Some people say, no, I use solid for everything. Well, that's not a good idea. Wires, especially on like grid caps, man, those things flex, 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 and then they break inside the insulation. You don't even know it. Where a wire is flexible, you use stranded. You can use stranded for the entire bottom of the chassis. It's up to you. Stranded for everything works fine. But solid wire from, tube socket to tube socket, stuff like that, not a problem. But just don't use the solid wire for anything that bends. You will pay the price if you do. I won't be able to show you the actual mechanics of soldering in this piece of wire because it's going to be a delicate operation. I can't hold the camera with one hand, zoom in, and work up inside there with the other. I'll be using these long needle nose to get the job done. And then, of course, there's always the problem of getting the soldering iron tip up in there also. So what I'm going to do is show you what we will be doing on paper. This is our coil, and this is where the resistor was. And when I clipped it off, I wound up with a shorter lead here than a longer one here, and a longer one there. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and try to snip them off at the same level, okay? Try to snip them off at the same length. I don't know how close I'm going to come. Then I'm going to use my little needle nose like you see right here. I'm going to sneak up inside there as best I can, and I'm going to try to put this wire with the two coils on the end over the top of those stubs and then solder them in. That's all there is to it. That's all I'm going to do. Now these coils are of course pre-tinned and everything when I made them, and it's flexible wire. It's stranded wire, so I can close it up or open it up a little further if need be, depending on what happens when I get it up in there. So that's what all I can do now is just go ahead and get it done, and then maybe I'll show it to you once it gets mounted on the wires or mounted on the leads before I solder it, and then I can show it to you after it's done. But the actual process of getting it done, it's just a matter of taking these needle nose and reaching up in there like that and pushing it down. And of course I'll have to position these two wires here in such a way that it'll slip down on there nice and easy. Well, don't ask me how, but I've actually managed to pull it off. Now all I have to do is solder it in place. Well, there we are, all soldered up. She's nice and snug. And don't ask me how I managed it, but I was able to get her done. Now we'll go ahead and put the coil back on the chassis, put a nut on one of the little legs that holds it in, snug it down a little. Then we'll check it for continuity to make sure we didn't mess anything up. You'll recall that in order to do the continuity check through that what was the resistor and that coil, we had to connect one lead to the plate of the 24, the ABC tube. And then we'd come up all the way across, and we'll go up through what is now the wire. That is now a wire. We'll go up through the coil and over to the grid cap connector. Now I've already got the black lead connected to the pin 2 of the 24, which is the plate underneath the chassis. Now all we have to do is take our little old red lead right here and touch it to the grid cap right here, and if we still have continuity, then we didn't mess anything up. So watch the old meter here. There it is. About 4.2 ohms, which is just about right. Okay, I think what we're going to do is call it quits right here. We got a little lucky tonight. What I'm going to do is put the other nut on the bottom of that coil that anchors it to the chassis. And before the next video starts, I'll have put the capacitor back in and resoldered the ground wire. I had to unsolder in order to get that, the flexibility to move this thing. Now next time, we're going to be messing with this tuning meter business. Now the tuning meter is off the top of the chassis. So we got to find these two wires right here. One there and this one over here. We got to search for them. We got to figure out which one they are and get them identified, okay? Also, we have to check this wire here We got to take a look at this wire here. And we have to take a look at this wire here. And that, people, should finish the entire thing up. At least I hope so. At least that you know, that top left-hand corner. But I'll tell you what, when we get down this area right here, next time, you know, if we have time, we'll start on this area up here. But I'll tell you what, when we get down in this part, man alive, that's going to be, I hate to even think about it. It's just, they're just wired. That guy put wires everywhere. I'm going to have to find out where they're at. Anyway, I hope you had fun with this. Until next time, this is John.